Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, is this season hitting justice a little too hard?
Not hard enough, honestly. All of the damage and trouble that he's caused, just the podcast, in addition to all of the psychological damage he's caused me personally, I would hope that Justice experiences more pain and heartbreak. On the list of people I hope experience pain and heartbreak that I consider close personal friends, he is not in the top 5, but I relish this nevertheless.
He's going through it today, folks. This is this loss to the Lions and just how blue the stands looked. This is him going through it.
I think this is an ownership problem. Really, it goes all the way to the top.
All the way to the top.
Organization.
Yeah. You almost feel bad until you remember that they don't get the Jets' first round pick because of what happened to Aaron Rodgers. They only get the second. I almost feel bad. I almost have a feeling, but then it passed. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to preview, and we're going to do that here in just a moment with a guest that Arif interviewed earlier today, and we also have a mailbag question as well. Mailbag questions, rather. But before we get to any of that...
One mailbag question. I'm disappointed in all of you.
We got one question. Just that. Well, we got the Blue Sky account now for the show, and then all of a sudden I just decided I'm only going to accept... I'm only accepting questions from Blue Sky now. We got one question out of this. It's unfortunate, but a good question nevertheless. So we got questions from the mailbag, but before we start, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you'd like to support us financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and join there. For $3.50 a month, or for a little bit less for the year subscription, you get access to the Discord, which has been fantastic the last few days. Just want to point that out. In addition to that, there's bonus episodes. Should have a new bonus episode out here in the next couple of days. And you can also get some other stuff too that will be available over at the Patreon. So patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to give like a one-time donation. Thank you to everybody who's done that. You can also go over to norsecode.threadless.com and be one of the cool kids with a t-shirt, with a poster, with a baby onesie, with a magnet. I was actually staring at the magnet I have of the 10th anniversary logo and enjoying all of the random inside jokes that are listed there. What a fine body pillow on that one, quite frankly.
There's some body pillow memes in the Discord too. There's a lot of memes that we need a meme channel now that I think about it.
We have one. It's called Online Brand.
Oh, no, but that's for general memes. I mean, a Norse Code specific.
Okay. That
for the Norse Code memes. Just to have them all in one place.
Actually wouldn't be a terrible idea. So, but check that out over at norsecode.threadless.com. So, also just want to make a mention of the Denver show. We will be doing a live show on the 17th of November inside of Denver proper. More details coming soon, but that will be happening on November 17th for the game on the 19th, and we will be giving away at least one ticket to the game. So, check us out in Denver on the 17th. Let's go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today with Billy Marshall. He is on the Roar podcast on Blue Wire Pods. So let's go to this interview that Arif conducted earlier today.
All right, I'm here with Billy Marshall, who does a podcast called The Roar on Blue Wire Pods covering the Carolina Panthers. We've gone back and forth a little bit over Twitter over the years, man. So we've got an epic matchup of 0-3, 0-3 teams, unique situation in the NFL where the last 4 undefeated teams, or all defeated teams, I should say, are playing each other, which gives us a real loser goes home kind of vibe to it. I think a lot of people will consider the season over for any of the teams that lose this weekend. The other ones being the Bears and Broncos. So kind of a weird situation, but I think both teams have pretty compelling storylines, right? Because the Vikings think that they're, secretly quite good despite having lost these games. The Panthers have an exciting young quarterback in Bryce Young, but also don't really have a means of supporting him. But it does sound like after he got injured and Andy Dalton played last week, it sounds like that Bryce Young will be playing this week. Is that right?
Yeah, he was a full participant today. He was a full participant yesterday. He also had his media availability today, which is putting him on track to start Sunday.
Okay. So we did see Dalton play a little bit. What are, to you, the primary differences between the two of them as quarterbacks?
Yeah, so I mean, with Andy Dalton, he's an experienced quarterback and traditional pocket passer in a sense with some mobility. But with Dalton, he's been in the league since 2011. It's over a decade, so he's seen pretty much every defense, every coverage. He knows what to do with the ball. The ball comes out of his hands pretty quickly. And yeah, I mean, with Bryce, there's still kind of a acclimation period going on. He's trying to kind of not only just learn the NFL offense, but also really kind of learn coverages and defenses and how they're attacking him. I did feel like, two of the defenses he faced the first 2 weeks were two of the better ones in the league. Very similar defenses with Atlanta and New Orleans. They come from the same Dennis Allen tree. And, if you watched, the Packers, the Saints last week, I know they lost, but they still kind of, for 3.5 quarters, were shutting down, the Packers. So that's a very tough defense, and it's even more amplified when you're facing, when you have a situation like Carolina does, where the skill talent necessarily is probably, bottom 5 in the league, if I'm being generous. But no, for Bryce, it certainly, he hasn't gotten off to the hottest start like the other two rookies, but I do think that there is going to be, just for him, a little more of a transition as far as just learning how NFL defenses are attacking him and becoming much more familiar with the offense. And there's been a lot of shuffling on the offensive line, which certainly doesn't help. But I do think that once he gets more reps, things will come more natural to him.
All right. I think that's probably fair. My experience with Bryce Young primarily has been watching JT O'Sullivan break down Panthers games, which has just been really incredible, but obviously is not definitive, right? He's just one guy, even though he's got an extraordinary amount of experience and the content is wonderful. Are there kind of any areas of Young's game that feel like are surprising to you, either positive or negative, based off of what you understood of him to be as a quarterback at Alabama?
Yeah, so I mean, there really hasn't been many positives yet, on a consistent basis, at least. So negatively, I do think that holding the ball a little too long has been, I think, the biggest issue with him. Prior to his injury, I think he was like one of the top quarterbacks in the league in time to throw. And it's not like Carolina has the greatest offensive line as it currently is constructed. So, his ability at Alabama to just quickly decipher defenses and get the ball out, no matter the situation, was, certainly a trait, that kind of appealed me to him. And, for me, I definitely think just his inability to just get rid of the ball at times has been a little frustrating. He needs to kind of speed up his process. And again, those type of things do take time, but, for, a guy like Bryce, who, a lot of the scouting reports and a lot of people who watched him, including myself, his cerebralness and just his processing at Alabama was outstanding. So it's just it's been a little interesting to see him kind of struggle in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And like you mentioned, it's difficult to get rid of the ball quickly if you don't anticipate your receivers getting open. Seems like that's been kind of an issue there, which there is an injury at receiver or two, it looks like. I didn't see that DJ Chark had a hamstring. We'll talk about that in a second as well. But just like on the Bryce Young question, obviously the primary concern that people had of him coming out was his size, right? I mean, he is smaller than most receivers in the league. You don't typically see that at quarterback. I don't know. I mean, he looks like a kid. I can't really soft play that. He just looks like a child. Is that playing out in whatever way? Either, hey, that ankle injury, or he's having difficulty seeing over the line, or his stance has created some issues with the way he really, any indication of whether or not his size has already started playing a role?
As far as his height, I don't think so. Now his size overall, the ankle injury, I mean, when he fell down, it did look pretty innocent. And so maybe, I don't want to get into like the genetics of,
right.
his body composition. So maybe if he had stronger ankles, I don't know, and certainly, Carolina's, the topic of turf versus grass is certainly a discussion point. And when he got injured, he was playing on a turf surface. But no, I mean, the thing is that Carolina is operating like a team that has a short quarterback. So if you've watched Kyler Murray over the years, you know that the Cardinals, when they had Kingsbury, they were primarily shotgun operated. And that's sort of how Carolina has taken the same approach. I mean, Bryce, I think he only attempted like one pass under center so far, and that was off a play action movement, one of those flood level concepts to the weak side. So as far as just trying to make him comfortable and allowing him to see over the line, they are kind of putting him in more advantageous situations with, the shotgun snaps. I do think they're probably, if not the highest, the higher teams that use it in the league. But no, I haven't noticed anything else. I just think physically, he's not Kyler Murray, so he can't escape and use his legs in that aspect. But he has, had a few moments where he's scrambled and made some nice moves as a playmaker. But he just kind of needs to kind of understand, when he is scrambling, he just needs to make a decision quicker because, again, he doesn't have Murray's size or strength to kind of, if he gets hit from behind, it's probably not going to be good news for him.
Right. So you mentioned that they're operating the offense with respect to his height in some ways. Does that also include limiting kind of the short or the middle of the field type throws, like quick slants and stuff like that? Because I know sometimes height can play a role in your ability to kind of execute that.
Yeah, I mean, they've done actually a decent job of, some of those Hank or stick concepts, some mesh concepts. I have seen them run it at times when he's back there, so I don't necessarily think he has an issue throwing over the middle. It's more or less just about that, how defenses are currently defending him, and at this point, Carolina's rushing offense has not been at the level they expected. So teams are definitely kind of sending an extra guy in the box just to kind of use like a rat or a hole player to prevent anything over the middle. And again, it's really tougher when these guys are struggling to get off press coverage as well. So I haven't noticed anything yet as far as just his ability to throw over the middle. He did have the 2 interceptions. Jesse Bates against Atlanta. One of them, Bates made a really nice play, and the other kind of he broke the coverage rules, and he made another pick. It was 2 very similar picks, and I don't necessarily see anything yet. I just don't think we have enough data to know one way or the other.
So we've talked a little bit about kind of the difficulties in evaluating Young because of the quality of his skill position groups. Let's talk about that right now. We'll talk about running backs in a little bit, but the receiver group seems like I wouldn't say I was necessarily optimistic about them going in, but certainly they have fallen underneath my expectations for their capability, at least based off of what I'm seeing, based off of the things JT O'Sullivan is telling me about their ability to separate. And again, when you do look at the All-22, kind of trying to figure out where Young should throw the ball sometimes becomes a bit of a challenge. Obviously here in Minnesota, we're, got this long relationship with Adam Thielen. He's a great route runner. He was kind of always open for the Vikings. That doesn't seem to be the case in Carolina. Jonathan Mingo, who I believe is coming off of a concussion, a limited participant, he might be someone that people are interested in, but, DJ Chark, for example, doesn't seem to be contributing in a big way. I don't know how much you can expect out of Terrace Marshall. I don't know how much you can expect out of Laviska Shenault. So what to you is kind of the state of that receiver room?
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, you definitely have to give them credit last week, especially Chark and Thielen. They certainly played well over, much over my expectations. But again, that Seattle secondary was missing their best player, Tariq Woolen. Jamal Adams is still out. So that was a much depleted unit. But they were still guarding them in very tight coverage. So Carolina had to kind of scheme around their some of their issues, and they did on the DJ Chark long touchdown. Seattle just busted a coverage, but it was a really nice call. It was like they called the two slants, and they had Chark run a wheel route. He was the most inside receiver, out of the trips formation, and they did a nice job scheming that open. And so for me, I think the biggest thing is just where kind of like how is the brain trust going to come together and figure out what's the best approach to scheme these guys open, because they aren't necessarily even your alpha wide receivers who could just separate by themselves without needing the scheme to kind of help them. So yeah, that's kind of just been the biggest thing. And more importantly, it's also about timing as well. Just being on the same page when Bryce is scrambling, kind of following those scramble rules to make sure kind of he has an outlet to throw. But yeah, I mean it's not a great group whatsoever, but I do think that there are members of this skill unit that they have experience, and they did show last week that they can produce. So it's just up to the two sides being on the same page.
How do you view the Jonathan Mingo pick? How do you view his very early progression so far? Do you think that he's somebody that is on the path to being kind of like a long-term reliable guy? Could he turn into a number one?
Yeah, I was a big fan of his coming out, but I also understood that he was a project. Just because playing in that Ole Miss offense, the air raid system that they have there, it's just going to be difficult to transition. Obviously, some of the recent Ole Miss receivers that have come into the league have taken it by storm, but yeah, for him it was different. I just felt like he needed a year or two to finally just get himself settled, and being relied upon in the role he has now, is certainly going to accelerate his growth, but. Yeah, it's still he's still a work in progress, because there are times where he doesn't necessarily run the right routes, or his landmark, or he's not running the right landmarks on the route. He's running the right routes, but he's not hitting the right areas of the field, and that can cause a little bit of cluster in certain areas. But no, he definitely has an exciting skill set. I think he has a vertical dimension, and he was pretty exciting when he had the ball in his hands too. Maybe took him a little too early, but for me, he's kind of more of a year 2, year 3 guy, and because of the situation as it is, he's being asked to do a lot at a very early stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he was picked a little bit ahead of where he was on the consensus board. I think he was even third round. So I don't want to say grade, because the board doesn't like grade into rounds, but like a third round suggestion, third round pick area. So certainly ahead of where I think if you want to call it a market or the industry put him, but definitely, like, I agree, he definitely has intriguing tools that have, developmental upside, so long as the coaching staff kind of knows what they're doing. On the other end of that, you've got some more experienced tight ends, some guys that have really disappointed for me in terms of my dynasty league, Ian Thomas. But also, players that have been around the league for quite a while. Hayden Hurst entered the league as a veteran and has since aged even more. So, he's up there. I don't even know how far apart he and Adam Thielen are in age, if I'm being honest. But you've got him, Tommy Tremble, who was a pick a couple of years ago that I think was more lauded for his blocking than receiving. What is this tight end group kind of? Maybe add is the wrong word, but how does it supplement the receiving group overall? And does it kind of enable Bryce Young, or is it another kind of problem that he has to work around?
Yeah, I would say the two younger guys, Thomas and Tremble, have been disappointing. And with Hurst, he's been kind of as advertised. I thought it was a pretty shrewd deal to get him, to sign him in the offseason. I mean, the deal was relatively fine. It wasn't necessarily a bargain or anything. Right. I just think, they needed, an extra tight end to really kind of help the progression of a rookie quarterback. And, he's been, in my opinion, he's been pretty good so far. But, the production probably isn't ideal. But as far as his ability to get open, he's been open for the most part. He's running the right routes. He's a pretty good safety valve. The other two, I would say Thomas has been very disappointing just as far as his blocking is concerned. Last year, him and Tremble, they were very, they were pretty solid when it came to run blocking. And this year it's been a struggle for them. And I'm not sure what the issue is. Maybe they're taking a little bit of time to learn some of the run concepts and get the blocking angles, but they've definitely been disappointing, I would say, to say the least.
Fair enough. All right, so this brings us back down to this running back group, and we can begin to discuss the offensive line in the context of, the run game, because those two are tied together. But the offensive line is just so bad, I kind of want to leave them to the last part of the offensive discussion. Because, God, good Lord, this offensive line. But
not great.
Yeah, not great. But independent of that, independent of evaluating kind of the blocking capability of this offensive line, these running backs, I thought, had a lot going for them entering the offseason. Chuba Hubbard had, I think, ended the season on a strong note last year. Miles Sanders, obviously, Philadelphia got rid of him, but he had a pretty good season with Philadelphia last year. The context, of course, being that any running back that is reasonably good that gets to play with a running quarterback is going to have a pretty good-looking season. I think DeAndre Swift is actually a really good example of that. How do you evaluate what these backs have been able to do? Do you think that did you have the same expectations that I had, that this was maybe an average, possibly above average, in the right circumstances running back group? Or did you always think, hey, this is doomed, but don't have the time or resources to invest in this now, we got to do it later?
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, last year when they traded McCaffrey, their running game kind of took off, and that was with, Chuba Hubbard and Raheem Blackshear kind of leading the way. So, I mean, certainly when you sign a guy like Miles Sanders, even if he was a beneficiary of the Philadelphia offensive line and just running game, he is no doubt the best running back coming into this organization. And he hasn't been bad at all. I think he's been pretty solid. It's just, again, you have multiple injuries on the offensive line. Corbett, who is their starting right guard, got a serious injury in the last game of the year in 2022. And then Christensen was just lost for the year, and Bozeman, he's been up and down so far. And just the replacements, one's like a 6th-round second-year player, and the other is a 4th-round rookie. So it's just been really tough. And I think the most disappointing thing is they brought back the same offensive line coach, and a lot of the similar just physicality that they were able to impose last year, just by virtue of being able to really successfully run the ball. And again, you had Sam Darnold and P.J. Walker as Baker Mayfield as the quarterback, and guys like Hubbard and Blackshear running. You would just kind of expect a normal progression when you enter a guy like Miles Sanders and presumably a quarterback upgrade too, but it just hasn't happened. And Sanders has been pretty good. I mean, he had a nice run last week where there was 2 guys right in the open hole, and he kind of made them miss and pulled off a nice run. So, yeah, it's the running backs I don't think have been poor whatsoever. It's just the situation in front of them that's really kind of let them down.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do like both of those backs. And Raheem Blackshear, I just don't know enough about. Our lads is telling me, hey, they acquired him from the Buffalo practice squad, which makes it seem like they found a back on the practice squad for Buffalo that might have been better than the backs they were going with. I don't know, man. Okay, let's discuss a little bit more in depth about this offensive line. You mentioned that Brady Christensen, who has been, I thought he should have been a tackle, but has been whatever in the one game that he played, is now on IR. Taylor Moton, a guy I've always been behind. In the draft, I wanted the Vikings to grab him way back in 2017. I think he showed up at the Senior Bowl. This is a guy I was definitely behind. He seems all right. So
yeah, he's really good. Yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, and then everything else seems kind of like it's collapsed. Chandler Zavala, I think a lot of people know now, PFF's lowest graded tackle, had a 0.0 game, has, I believe, given up more pressures last week than any other guard has over 3 games, which of course means that, and these are all PFF numbers, SIS has different numbers, Next Gen has different numbers, but that's, he therefore leads the league in pressures given up by a fairly substantial margin. And so we have a mutual friend, Scott, who very much disliked the way PFF graded Darrell Williams, who they regarded as a very high level right tackle. He was helped a lot. in that regard. So his grade kind of mischaracterized him, which I believe the Giants or the Bills found out. I forget where he went. But yeah, it turned out to not be very good. Here, I think PFF is correct. This guy is cheeks. He's a rookie, and I kind of did like him coming out. I thought he ended up getting overhyped by the end of the draft process, but those things happen. But he's been like bad. And it's not like Ekwonu, the left tackle from last year's class, has been good either. What in the world is going on, man?
Yeah, it's not good. And again, it certainly doesn't help, rookie 4th rounder. And, he started off as right guard, and then they pushed him back to left guard, which is where he played in college. And again, a player like him, a lot of people, noted him as a combine snub just because he didn't go to the combine, but he was at the Shrine game, and he got a lot of laudits from there, from the people who were in attendance. So, for me, yeah, he's been, he's struggled. Let's just be honest. It's not been pretty whatsoever. And I just think a situation that he's going through, I kind of expected the coaches to kind of also, help him out in some regards too, and just help him kind of, maybe slide the protection one way and have the center help as well, or the left tackle, just figure out the protection so he's not, isolated and, getting humiliated on every snap. I don't know if they can afford to bench him because I just don't know what they have available behind him. That's kind of the situation right now.
What's was it Calvin Throckmorton, right? Or is he starting?
Yeah, it's Throckmorton. He's I don't know if he's starting, but he definitely received quite a bit of snaps last week, so he might be kind of in a rotation, or he could be potentially lining up to start.
Yeah, which they grabbed him off of waivers this year, I want to say.
Yeah,
and so it's a guy that grabbed off of waivers and 2 undrafted free agents, rookies, 2 undrafted rookie free agents are the current depth chart, besides David Sharp, who I believe is just a tackle, can only play tackle,
right,
from my understanding. So that is rough. I don't know how else to put this. Is you benching him for who is a very interesting question. We did not talk about that 6th round second-year player Cade Mays that much. It sounded like you had some positive words to say about him, and then Bradley Bozeman we didn't talk about at all. A guy that I think NFL Twitter overall thought was kind of overpaid, but based on my reading of Panthers Twitter, thought it was nice to get him back. What's kind of your read on those two?
Yeah, I mean, Bozeman, he certainly started off his career playing in the Greg Roman offense, and before that he was at Alabama, so he's a physical, interior lineman who really gets after in the run game. But overall in pass protection, he's been, he's kind of struggled even last year too. But he was kind of reliable, and they needed just a veteran center with a rookie QB. And, Mays is sort of similar in that regard. He, very physical point of attack guy, but he just, when he's setting vertically in the pass game, he doesn't necessarily play with the great knee bend. He lunges at times. But if you ask him to just fire off the ball and, establish leverage in a run game and move guys back, he has a very strong lower half, and that's where he can create movement for both of them. So I just think overall with the offense, there's just an identity crisis right now, because a lot of these guys in the offensive line, their main strengths are run blocking. Moten aside, who's pretty dependable, he's just a solid overall right tackle, does everything pretty well. But the other 4, their strengths are run blocking, and you saw it last year. So until Corbett kind of comes back, they need to kind of lean on the run game and really kind of help establish some type of momentum offensively.
And Bryce Young, to be clear, is just not part of that run game.
Yeah, right now, no. I mean, the only thing he can really do is just, he's had a few scrambles that's gone far, but he isn't an extension of it like a Cam Newton, for instance.
Right, yeah. To pick a name at random, yeah. Man, opposites, right? Holy crap.
Gosh.
So speaking of our mutual friend Scott, Cam Newton truther, so just for some context, so Vikings fans have been watching Kirk. Kirk has largely been playing, I would say, pretty well, but the fumbles and the interceptions are a problem. So he ranks 11th in EPA. When you get rid of turnovers for every quarterback, he ranks 7th in EPA. Bryce Young, 32nd out of 34 in EPA. When you get rid of turnovers, 30th. So it's been kind of a tough road offensively. In terms of design, before we get to the defense, in terms of design, I don't know much about this offensive coordinator, Thomas Brown. I don't even know if he plays a role. Maybe it's all Frank Reich. What is kind of the best things they do? What are the worst things to do? Are there good things? Are there bad things? What do you feel about this design?
Yeah, I definitely kind of an extension of what I just said about like they need to find their identity with, Thomas Brown coming in. He was part of the McVay tree. He was with the Rams the past like 3 or 4 years, and you yourself would know with Vikings fans, KOC coming from the Rams as well. Those guys have had a lot of success in the league, but when he came here, he's joining Frank Reich, who comes from like a completely different system altogether, more of a similar to like a Doug Peterson, Andy Reid system. So it's just kind of understanding the dynamics at play as far as what type of offense does this team want to be. Again, right now it's more Reich influenced, but some of the other coaches that they've brought on, it's a little, they paid a lot of money for these guys. It's just, what is the system going to be moving forward? And right now, I still don't think we have enough data to really know. But it just doesn't look consistent overall.
Okay. I lied. There's one more question I wanted to ask because it's just kind of who the Vikings are now. Bryce Young, how is he when he's blitzed?
Not great, I would say right now. It's yeah. I mean, with Bryce right now, the quarterback production overall, you're just not going to find anything that resembles even below average right now, and that's not his fault. That's not all of his fault. Partially, obviously, to blame. It's tough, and I think for him coming into this week, knowing you're going to be facing a scheme that relies a lot on zero blitz, you're going to have to get rid of the ball quickly, and I think he can do that. But it's just going to be interesting to see, if the Vikings, back out, drop 8 like they did against against the Eagles. Mm-hmm. So it's just going to be kind of like a cat and mouse game as far as when they are going to bring pressure, when they aren't. But overall, I would say just everything operationally, offensively has been a little bit of a struggle. For me, I just want to see like consistency and just some type of semi-competent,
right.
Attack through the air.
So we'll move on to the defense. Kind of a who's who situation with the Panthers. A bunch of injuries on that defense. J.C. Horn on IR, Shaq Thompson on IR, Henry Anderson on IR. I think that's everybody on IR, but we also know that Xavier Woods is injured. Doesn't look like he'll play. Frankie Luvu on the injury report. I think it looks like he'll play. You'll know better than me. But the defense still has like some fairly good players. I remember Dante Jackson playing very well last year. Jeremy Chin has been fairly good in the versatile roles that he's played. Brian Burns is headlining that defense, so there's still quality players, and the aggregate result for the Panthers has been about average in terms of EPA. By my eye, they're kind of a below average defense. Certainly willing to be convinced otherwise, but just before we get into the individual position groups. What's your take on the defense overall? And also, did I miss any injuries that are important to cover?
No, I think you hit on all of the important ones. Luvu was practicing today in a limited capacity, so we'll see how he trends closer to Sunday. But as far as this defense is concerned, I think they've been pretty... they've been above average. Last week was just really tough for them. Because it was a short week traveling to the West Coast, and they were just completely gassed in that second half. So Seattle was really able to just run the ball and really put up a lot of yardage on them. But before that, they held Seattle to 4 field goals in the first half. They were really stingy in the red zone. But overall, it's part of that scheme that's really taking over the NFL. A lot of Fangio influence, with Evero coming from Los Angeles. And I know we spoke about some of the lack of identity on offense, but defensively, I definitely think there is certainly an identity, and they're playing to the players' strengths. I think Derek Brown and Shai Tuttle, the defensive lineman they signed from the Saints this offseason, both of them have been pretty good. As far as like stopping the run is concerned, though, it's been a little bit of a kind of hot and cold. Like I said last week, it was tough just because for me personally, I felt that they were gassed. And they're still trying to implement, how the linebackers learn the run fits. Deion Jones, formerly of the Falcons, a longtime linebacker, he was signed to their practice squad a couple weeks ago, and he started last week. He had a nice interception, but as far as just stopping the run, I think it comes down to like how the second level does, as opposed to the first level, and that's been a big issue with some of the edge rushers here the past 3 years. They haven't really done a great job of setting an edge and being able to kind of funnel runs to the linebackers, particularly Burns. If there is a problem with his game, it's just been his ability to hold up on the edge and run defense. But overall, it's still, I would still classify it as an area that they're improving. But I think the strength of this team comes from their pass rush and their ability to really affect the quarterback on passing downs. They've kind of had to institute a lot more quarters and quarters match, just because they're trying to protect these corners, particularly Henderson and Jackson. They both of them are a little susceptible to the deep ball, and they're particularly Jackson. He's very aggressive. Last week Seattle got him on a double move, and the week before that the Saints did the same thing. So if you're looking for Addison to run a double move on him sometime during the game, I definitely think the Vikings are going to use that against him. That's just been his issue his entire career. But yeah, it's a defense that I think it's going to play greater than the sum of its parts, but I don't think it's going to reach kind of that top 10 level that some people expect just because of the injuries. But it is a formidable unit and certainly a strength of their team.
Sure. So let's talk about kind of that edge defender group. So obviously, like I mentioned, Brian Burns is a big part of that, but they've made investments in that over the years. This draft, they drafted DJ Johnson. I think they also grabbed in 2020 at Penn State edge rusher Gross Matos. Yep. They signed veteran edge rusher Justin Houston, which is always kind of nice to see which team he's popping up on this year. And then they got that crazy super athlete Amari Barno, who said that was what, last year's draft, late round pick, who I think he tested as a smaller guy, but had this 40-inch vert and ran super fast and is kind of just fun from a testing perspective. I don't know kind of how these guys all play out, who's even active on game day, but there's a lot of investment here. I feel like aside from Brian Burns, that investment has not fully played out in the way that the Panthers had envisioned.
Yeah, so I'll start with the third round rookie they traded up for this year, DJ Johnson. A lot of people, a lot of the fans and myself included, were scratching our head at that decision. I mean, obviously, again, it's a third round pick, so it's not nothing. But it was just a very curious move, just because even going back to consensus board, that's not exactly where he was projected. I think it was maybe a fifth or sixth rounder in that range. But for him, he's been inactive, a healthy scratch the first 3 weeks, and during his press conference today, the defensive coordinator Evero spoke about him. He just kind of mentioned it it's kind of a numbers game right now, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. I mean, he wasn't necessarily impressive during the preseason either. So yeah, that's obviously a little bit of a concern, but you do hope for some type of development down the line. Yeah, as far as the other guys are concerned, I do think Gross Matos, while he hasn't necessarily produced like the player they were expecting when they drafted him in 2020. One thing I've noticed is he's really kind of developed a niche role. It's kind of like that Arden Key role a couple years ago in San Francisco when he went there, he really kind of unleashed a lot of his skill set as a pass rusher from the inside. Mm-hmm. And Gross Matos has kind of made a little bit of a niche role as a inside pass rusher on third downs. That's one thing he's kind of done a really good job of. And he's been, again, okay as just like a pure edge rusher from a run defense perspective. But yeah, Justin Houston, I think you're going to get. He's been pretty solid. There's nothing been too crazy in one way or the other about him. He's just been pretty dependable. I mean, you could expect him to understand like leverage and how to get off blocks and where to funnel certain runs, and obviously he has a decent pass rush skill set as well. So he complements Burns really effectively. But it's just the guys behind him. Again, Gross Matos, his role mainly, at least the role that he kind of excels in right now, it's mainly as an inside rusher.
All right. So with that in mind, I mean, I think that gives us a little bit of context for the rest of that defensive line because, Derek Brown, I think I primarily see him as kind of a run stopper. Shy Tuttle has been kind of an effective 3 technique over the years, so it's not as if he's a pure run stopper. But in terms of identifying guys that can rush the passer, it seems like they might need that kind of interior presence that a spinner like Gross Matos can provide. What can you tell me about the rest of that interior defensive line group?
Yeah, I mean, Brown, he's certainly putting it all together. There's certainly, areas of his game that he's not necessarily like your traditional, 3 technique that's just going to shoot gaps and get upfield, but he has a lot of just grown man strength in a way. I posted a couple clips of him week 1 when he was just completely humiliated. Lundstrom was like the highest paid guard in the NFL. But for him, he's still developing as a pass rusher in a lot of ways. Certainly he holds up better as a run defender, no doubt about it. But I think just from a pass rush perspective, he certainly has plenty of just strength to collapse the pocket, and he can get off blocks really well. He has a nice arm over in some respects. So he's developed kind of a pass rush repertoire since he came into the league, which it was certainly not a strength of his when he entered the NFL, but he's gotten much better at it, I would say. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think he's the guy you should be keying in on if you're a defense. If you can kind of contain him and send maybe extra help at on the edges towards Burns, then there might be opportunity for your offense to really thrive. But from an interior perspective, he's kind of like the main guy that you really want to just identify each time you're down there. But yeah, the other guys, Tuttle, Jameson, they're solid. I mean, Tuttle especially, I was a pretty big fan of his when he was in New Orleans, but as a 3 technique, he's your traditional classic guy. They play different roles within this defense too. Sometimes he lines up at like 4-eye, but for the most part, he's just trying to shoot gaps and really affect the passer.
A nice change from like previous Panthers defenses where both defensive linemen were nose tackle types, and you're just trying to figure out how to get a pass rush from the outside.
Oh yeah.
just a lot of it. Well, so that brings us, I think, to that linebacker group, because if you've got a fairly classic setup where you've got somebody you're comfortable stopping the run, got somebody who shoots gaps up the middle, that puts a little bit of stress on some of the linebackers to be a little bit better in run defense than we're used to seeing from the Fangio guys, because very often the linebackers are a de-emphasis in a lot of these defenses. Obviously, Ejiro Evero was able to use the linebackers fairly well in Denver, enough that people were kind of hoping that he'd get a head coaching job coming out of that. But obviously, without that happening, kind of in a situation like the Vikings where they've got a defensive mind that could become a head coach, and in the meantime, you're kind of hoping to get a lot more out of the linebackers. So without Shaq Thompson, you've got a linebacker group that I mentioned, Frankie Louvu. I know Grugier Hill has played a fair amount. You mentioned Deion Jones getting promoted up from the practice squad. It, to me, seems like a group that does not fit the Fangio style defense that I've become a little bit accustomed to, but the one I've become accustomed to is the Donatel one, which is like the least creative usage of that setup in the NFL. But it seems to eschew creativity, which is what the linebacker unit, I think, thrives the most out of, especially when you've got Jeremy Chin. You can play safety, nickel, or linebacker. How exactly are these linebackers used? How effective are they within these roles?
Yeah, so it's interesting because with Luvu especially, he's he's a versatile player. Like, and when he first arrived in Carolina, like the strength of his game was mostly as like, a chess piece in a lot of ways, as far as just blitzing him from like, through the A gaps, from like a double mug look or coming off the edge, and that's still primarily his role. I would never like classify a strength of his in coverage, especially as like a middle hole player when you're asking him to drop like in Tampa 2 or something like that. But I mean, he does a pretty good job of just matching with, routes out of the backfield. But, I think the traditional Mike backer, which was Shaq Thompson, and in this case is going to be Deion Jones, they're going to be, creating up a lot of different exotic looks. So you should expect him to be, in that middle hook zone area. I don't necessarily expect him to be like that whole player. What they usually like to do is have, a lot of post snap rotation. So one of the safeties potentially is going to come down and play that robber / rat role that is kind of popular in these type of defenses. Whether it's Von Bell or one of the replacement safeties. I mean, Chin as well is kind of like a de facto linebacker in some ways too, but his role has been a little interesting. I'm sure we'll get into that. But as far as like the linebackers, I think they're going to try to simplify it as much as possible, just because Deion Jones just got here a few weeks ago. I mean, he was here during training camp, but it was like a late signing, and then he just got activated to the full-time 53 like last week, and that was his first game. And now when you're facing a prone passing attack like Minnesota, I just think they're going to be very like judicious as far as like his roles and responsibilities. They don't want to make it too exotic. So you should probably expect like one of the safeties to really take on that, deep hole, like that middle of the field area, as opposed to like going back to like 2012 to 17, where you had Kuechly just being able to, flip his hips and cover like 40 yards right in that, that middle hole as a Tampa 2 Mike. But yeah, no, it's it's definitely it's definitely the weakest part of this defense for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, then let's talk about the safeties, and I think the natural transition is to talk about Jeremy Chin. I think he won Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't fully remember. He certainly was a top balloting candidate when he was a rookie, but like I said, can play a variety of roles. I think a lot of people scouted him as a safety, but the role that Carolina put him in made a lot of sense. I was a little bit concerned because I was like, hey, that's the Shaq Thompson role, the safety linebacker type guy. I don't know if they're going to be able to see the field at the same time. Didn't matter, found ways to use both of them. And it's one of those areas where I think aside from players like Owusu-Koramoah in Cleveland, it's actually really difficult to get that position to work, because a lot of those guys, they're either safeties because they're not very good at hitting, and so they don't play linebacker. They're linebackers because they're not very good at coverage. And so safety linebacker hybrids don't often tend to work out. Carolina seemingly has two, or at least two when they're all healthy. How exactly has Jeremy Chin been used? How does that enable the rest of that defense? You mentioned that in the context of this particular defensive setup, that you've got a guy that can play closer to the box and the rat hole drops down after the defense has been declared into that hole, and can kind of headhunt over crossers and meshes. But how exactly can Chin be maximized, and how they've been using him?
Yeah, it's been interesting because the first 2 weeks, his role was very limited. I would say he saw like maybe 30% of the snaps, and it was just very curious from that standpoint. And a lot of people were wondering if he's a potential trade candidate because they weren't sure what his role in this defense would be, which kind of, sucks for him. I mean, he's been, certainly a player I've enjoyed watching, but, like you said, there's just a very limited, NFL role for this type of player. I think you have to have a very specific defense. I think the Patriots do a really good job of using a guy like Duggar in that respect. But obviously, how many defenses are similar to that around the league. There's not many. And so, his role has did expand, last week, and it should expand this week as well, just because, again, the injuries are making it, giving him this opportunity with Xavier Woods now out. Week one, they tried to match him up against Kyle Pitts in man coverage. It didn't go so well. Just Pitts didn't really get the ball as much because Ritter was, not opting to go in his direction. And so they kind of made that an emphasis, and he didn't really play that much against the Saints. And last week he was pretty average against Seattle. As a run defender, he's really good. He's a really reliable tackler. He doesn't really allow, runners to kind of beat him, takes good angles. But, for me, a safety in this day and age, they really have to cover. And, it's just, I'm not sure how much responsibility and roles they want to give him in that aspect. So, I mean, because of the situation with the injuries, he's going to see an increase in playing time. But I'm very curious to see how it kind of progresses as far as like what his role will be from a pass coverage standpoint.
That makes sense. Within that secondary, there's also, like we mentioned Von Bell a little bit. We mentioned Dante Jackson getting, kind of beat on double moves. I think that, at the beginning of the season, when you take a look at the schedule, you're like, hey, J.C. Horn is this, really remarkable corner. We'll put him on Justin Jefferson, hopefully. I don't know how much Ujiro ever likes to play sides or shadow. I know that a lot of the Fangio defenses tend to play sides, but hey, let's get J.C. Horn on Justin Jefferson, give him some help if he needs it. And now we're at a spot where, he's not there. Dante Jackson has some pretty clear weaknesses. I don't know, like CJ Henderson, I mean, certainly he has the athleticism to keep up, but I don't think the technique or the instincts. How exactly do you take a look at this cornerback group and say, hey, here are kind of the answers that they'll have, maybe not to stop Jefferson or, who knows, maybe, but to at least slow him down enough for the offense to be able to catch up.
Yeah, so just go back to week 2. Sean Desai's similar type of defense. A lot of the, cover 8, the poach technique that they usually use, where the safeties are kind of protecting against guys like Jefferson in some ways, like bracketing. I do expect there to be. I don't expect any of these corners at this particular time to be traveling with a guy like Jefferson. They're just not good enough, and so. They're going to do a lot of different kind of coverage variations, a lot of stubby, which, it's like a split field coverage versus like the 3x1s. And, the safety on the kind of weak side is going to really kind of protect and look out for those over routes as well. And so, it's going to be tough for them, no doubt about it. And a lot of it is just, I think they're going to try to keep things pretty simple, but O'Connell has such a really good, he understands the rules of this defense. So, when you do see like an over route, he might kind of create, an opportunity where, the receiver runs behind the defenses. I think there was a play in that playoff game between Jacksonville and the Chargers where, Jacksonville scored like a long touchdown because the safety just went behind the safeties, and when they were playing that type of technique, and they, couldn't stop it. And so I think that because KOC, had Dontel last year, and he worked with Staley when he was in Los Angeles, he pretty much has a pretty good grasp on, the rules of this defense and how to attack it. So as far as like Evro is concerned, I think he's going to try to, not lean into it, make it too complex for these guys, just because they're trying to just simplify it as much as possible for the defense to, understand, like not get beat over the top. So I would expect just like a lot more like generic like Tampa 2 covered 3 quarters, as opposed to like some of the more traditional complex Fangio coverages.
Okay. I think that covers, I don't think we're going to see like Jamie Robinson or anything like that, right? So I think that covers most of the players in the secondary that we wanted to talk about, unless there's something, that we kind of skated over that you wanted to mention.
No, I think that's from what I understand, because of the personnel as it currently stands, I'd certainly everyone that I can think of.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Unless there's like a special teams note that you want to add, which I wouldn't be opposed to or anything like that. we can get right into kind of predicting who's going to win, who's going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, special teams, it's not too... Pinero's a pretty good kicker. He did miss one last week, but it was from 55. Outside of that, it's the return game is okay. It's nothing special. So that's kind of where his special teams is at right now.
Awesome. Cool. So I actually did not pull up the line yet. So unless you know the line off the top of your head.
Yeah, this afternoon it was at -4, or the Vikings were favored by 4.
Sure. So Vikings favored by 4. What do you feel about that? What's your pick?
I think honestly, I think the Vikings will win. Just because like they've been a little unlucky the past the first 3 weeks, and frankly they're just more talented than Carolina is right now. Bryce Young, I do think he will play better. I mean, there's nowhere to go but up. So I think this overall offense...
Such a rough sentence, man.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go but up.
And I just think like the first 2 weeks of defenses they faced, they are good teams. And last week they faced the Seattle defense it's a pretty average defense. And so you saw some progression with the offense. I know it was a different QB. And Minnesota, I mean, I read your tweet and I saw Ted Nguyen say the same thing. It's like, they're doing the right things, but they just don't have the personnel for it right now. And I think that Carolina, I do trust that they'll have a decent enough game plan. And I do not expect whatsoever to, this rushing attack to have the day Philadelphia had, or for Bryce Young to have a Justin Herbert type day. But I do think that they can at least muster up, 2 to 3 touchdown drives. That would go a long ways. And so for me, I think Minnesota wins like 27-21. I just think like Minnesota's offense is going to be too much for this defense to really, handle. And who knows how turnovers go, especially, we've been watching these two teams play for the past 4 or 5 years. It's always just insane. A couple years ago, Sam Darnold led like a 99-yard touchdown drive, take it to overtime, and in 2020 it was a bonkers game as well. So yeah, honestly, when these two teams play, there's always just bound for crazy stuff to happen. But I just think like Kirk has been playing pretty well outside of just some unfortunate situations at the end of the game. And I'm not sure, like, Kirk will be like Gino's a good quarterback, don't get me wrong, but I just think this passing offense overall is going to be the toughest they face. So I will say 27-21. Carolina probably gets like a late touchdown to, make it a 6-point game at the end.
Sure. Yeah, finally get the Vikings in the win column of the one score category. All right. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same spot. To me, I think it'll be just a little bit closer just because I don't trust that Vikings defense quite yet. But yeah, I don't know if maybe 27-23, something like that. Not substantially different than what you suggested, but the over certainly, because I think the over under right now is 45-45, and it's the Vikings defense, man. I don't know. So yeah. So thanks so much. Remind people where they can find you.
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow me on Twitter at BillyM_91. There, and you can also listen if you want to hear our perspective on the Panthers. You can check us out on the Roar. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, or whatever medium you listen to.
Dope. And Billy does a ton of stuff during the draft too, so always fun to have him among my follows when we're like tracking prospect visits and stuff like that. All right, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Let's get to our mailbag question, or questions. From Damian Barrett, he asks, has there been any noticeable improvement in Kevin O'Connell's in-game time management? I don't think it was discussed in the Chargers review, but couldn't he have saved at least one timeout at the end of the game? Is he any better than Zimmer when it comes to this?
I don't know that we had much of a discussion about his time management last year because we don't tend to have discussions about successful, I don't even know if good is the right word, but successful time management, which obviously the Vikings did not really have many concerns with that, whether or not time management was a reason that helped them win. But generally speaking, I don't think that there's a problem. I think that the Vikings have done a pretty good job of making sure that they've got, the whole situational masters thing, which, has been joked about a ton, but actually does produce meaningful outcomes. I mean, he's got a time management guy that he actively listens to and doesn't seem to have a huge problem with. I don't recall all of the situations where the Vikings used their timeouts in the Chargers game. So that might just be on me for not having like a very good grasp of the way those timeouts were used or not used. But abstractly, it would have been nice, but we'd have to have a discussion about like what timeouts would you say that they shouldn't have called, right? And not like, ideally, like if, for example, if the wrong personnel out on the field and they call a timeout, to me, that is not a quote unquote a timeout they shouldn't have called. Certainly it's a preventable situation, but you want to be given that situation, you want to call that timeout, which is not an example of poor time management when you get there by the end of the game. So I don't know that he's got like notably bad time management or anything like that. What really kind of is difficult to really tease out is that because so many NFL coaches are bad at time management, and because it's really difficult to build like a great, it actually probably is not that now that I think about it, but it seems difficult to build a great model for evaluating time management, especially because we don't always have a good reason as to why somebody may have called a timeout. It's difficult to, rank all 32 coaches in terms of time management in like a way that is at least comprehensive enough to capture the last couple of years of data. So is he worse than the average coach? By my understanding, definitely not. But would it have been better to have a timeout there? Sure. I just don't know I don't remember what the timeouts were used for. And so I can't really speak to that. But it doesn't strike me as a problem.
Next question is going to be from Brian Jellerson, who asks, for a Reef's sports therapist corner we don't spend nearly enough time in, you have a patient, male, 35, professional quarterback, who is statistically considered one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but he has confidence issues when he has to call his own plays in critical situations, giving him a reputation for, quote, choking. How do you fix him?
Okay. First of all, I am obviously qualified to answer this question. Second, when I read this question, my first thought was, oh, just become Andrew Luck. And James is like, yeah, if you could just become Andrew Luck, why not do it? But what I really meant was, like, first of all, yeah, if you could just transform to Andrew Luck. But no, what I meant was that there's this great Seth Wickersham story that follows Andrew Luck around, and it does a really good job of explaining how screwed up you have to be in order to be a quarterback in the NFL. And there's an insane amount of control that Luck had and still attempts to exert over his life that comes from being a quarterback. And the example that stuck in my brain, there's tons of examples in the story, if I recall correctly, but the example that stuck out in my brain was that as soon as he shows up to like a restaurant with any of his friends or family, he orders all of their food for them at the table without even like discussing what they want. So it's like, you'll have, the pepperoni pizza, you'll have the pasta primavera, you'll have the fettuccine Alfredo, and they just have to, that's just it. And so the story follows like Luck and his wife and like, I think his therapist, they're just chilling, hanging out with all of them. And the therapist, so Luck starts to do the thing, right? He's like, you're going to have this, you're going to have this, you're going to have this. And the therapist is like, no, we're not. And he's like, yeah, you are? What? And the therapist is like, no, you're not our quarterback. That's not how it works. You're our friend, Andrew Luck. So I'm going to order what I want. And it's just like this thing that like kind of breaks his brain because his brain was so broken by being a quarterback. So anyway, Cousins should break his brain by controlling all of it. So first of all, Julie's got to stop dressing him. He's got to have the confidence to pick his own clothes. He's got to start ordering other people's meals. He's got to tell police officers that actually they're the ones getting the ticket, not him. Just like normal, everyday, controlling your life around you type behavior. He needs to become the most toxic person you know, but in a very cheerful, happy way, where you're just kind of like, well, I didn't appreciate that, but certainly he means well, right? And so he's got to get rid of the glass tube with rocks. If I die, I die. That's no longer good. You won't die because you will it that way. That's how. So you got to overcorrect in the other direction and take control over just impossible aspects of your life. This will lead to him having an ethos of control. So he'll be able to get involved in the play calling, in the game planning, have ownership of the offense in a real way, and call that quarterback sneak that he apparently is so traumatized to call. We discussed that on the podcast last week, right?
We absolutely did. Earlier this week, yes.
Yeah.
That's that is certainly a possible answer. just become Andrew Luck. Just become broken. Beef Brewski asks, what did you make of Timo's chart? One interpretation would be that replacing Wanham and Pat Jones with average talent could vastly improve the Vikings defense. Or is there something else about Flores' defense that makes these players look worse?
I mean, I think the chart actually demonstrates both of those things, because the chart gives us how difficult a defensive lineman's assignment might be, or in this case, an edge rusher's assignment might be. He also tweeted out the same chart for interior defenders and also for guards and tackles. So how difficult their assignment might be based off of things like, double teams, whether or not it was a play action, that kind of stuff, how long the quarterback is holding onto the ball, and what their PFF grade is after accounting for that. So on average, what is a PFF grade coming off of a double team? All right, now what was this guy's grade? We subtract one from the other. Now we have his grade over expectation, right? That kind of thing, right? And so you can compute basically the average grade for a defensive player based off of all of these factors that occurred to them on that play. And Danielle Hunter's above average. A lot of people seem to be like, oh no, Danielle Hunter's not playing well enough. And, he's not Myles Garrett, who is just like in his own universe, like up at the top, right? It's like Myles Garrett, big gap, Michael Parsons, big gap, TJ Watt, and then everybody else is like in some melange. I don't mind that Danielle Hunter is not like fourth on that list. But yeah, I think that it demonstrates that their assignments are fairly difficult. And, some people, when I tweeted this out, were like, why are teams like double teaming them and not Hunter? And it's because Brian Flores is good at his job. If you could pick who you'd want on your defense to be double teamed, it would very obviously be Pat Jones or whoever, right? It would not be Danielle Hunter. You want him in the one-on-one. And so they put them in situations where they are double teamed. And so you can, create those just by alignment, like by putting these guys, head up over the tackle or even between the tackle and the guard, like a 4-eye, and then having Danielle Hunter lined up out wide, in which case Hunter is much more likely to have a single team. Not, always, but you line him up away from the tight end and you make it more likely that that's not going to happen. They can always motion a tight end. Those things always change, but that gives you better odds in securing a one-on-one, right? And you occupy multiple potentially offensive linemen with alignment that way. You can also do it through twists and stunts. So, for example, a penetrator and a looper, those are the two characters on a two-person stunt. The penetrator will dig into a gap to try and secure that double team. So they'll say they're lined up between the tackle and the guard. They will attempt to move into the guard with no one on the tackle. So the tackle is going to think that they have that person as their assignment. In the meantime, the person who's looping will obviously loop around, and that's who the pressure is designed for. So they have a very difficult job because they're not going to actually very likely be able to make a play, right? I think probably the best team to do this was the Harbaugh 49ers when they had Justin Smith and Aldon Smith do these tackle end stunts all the time to clear up Aldon Smith. And the Vikings do this a fair amount too. They didn't do it as much in week one. I was kind of surprised, but yeah, they create easier assignments for Hunter. So that's one thing. The other thing is that Pat Jones and DJ Wanham are not good, right? Like that's why they signed Marcus Davenport. Obviously, this I think it's an ankle injury. This injury is creating a problem, but that's why they signed him, is because they don't think that these guys are starters, and they're not. And so that's what it suggests, right? Is that if you had someone else besides the two of them, then yeah.
Next question is from Osman, who asks, the Niners, Rams, Dolphins, and Packers are all near the top in use of motion, while the Vikings are bunched in the middle with most of the other teams. Why hasn't Kevin O'Connell taken the Vikings offense into the future like his brethren? Similar question from Raul, who asks, I wanted to ask a question about the game, like where did the pre-snap motion in our offense go? But I'm left thinking about the bigger picture, namely the Roman Empire. What team building lessons can we learn from Brutus's betrayal and assassination of Caesar? The whole like men only thinking about the Roman Empire thing.
They think about the Roman Empire once a day. Yeah. Which, like, someone asked me, completely non-topical, by the way, but that's what the mailbag is for. Someone asked me, like, hey, there's this guy on Twitter. He's known as Cybersmith. If you want to know more about him, just Google. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to go through everything. Can you like compile like, you know, some of the interesting things that you found out? Because you told me about him, and now I'm intrigued. And I was like, okay, cool. This guy thinks that Romans all lived in like tiny colosseums. Like all Romans, right? Like all of the Roman structures were tiny colosseums, because the only surviving Roman architecture we have are like aqueducts and colosseums. And like people attempt to point out like, well, most of the homes are built out of wood because it's cheaper and more available. And you wouldn't be able to afford it if you're like the average Roman citizen, right? Like you can't just build a house out of Roman concrete. And he was like, well, we don't have any evidence of that, which, by the way, that's not true. We do, right? But like, it's like, but you know, it's some of them lived in villas, but most of them, I imagine, lived in tiny colosseums. So I can't like not now think about the Roman Empire meme without thinking about this guy who just thought that everyone lived in colosseums. By the way, that's not even in the top 10 most interesting things about this guy. So heads up if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so what lessons can we learn? First of all, tyranny is bad. So everything I said that Kirk Cousins should do, don't do it. You might get stabbed by, I don't know, TJ Hawkinson. I don't know who Brutus would be in this situation, but that sounds right. Yeah, you know, democratic processes are good. Allow player input on play design, I think, is maybe the answer to this, which might also help resolve I don't know if motion at the snap is a problem, but, you know, might resolve the motion at the snap concern that some people have, that it's not enough.
Going to Ingram's left arm for a moment, on the Strib podcast, Ben brought up the possibility of both guards getting swapped out. We know the trials and tribulations of Ingram, but what has Cleveland done this season, and what do we expect, or what do you think we could expect if Brandel cracks the starting lineup?
I actually think Ezra Cleveland has been playing fairly well, so I don't know kind of what drives that level of conversation. It's not as if like Ben just makes stuff up, so certainly there must be something kind of driving that for him, but I don't know kind of from my perspective why you would do that, but I think he's been playing pretty well. I mean, he's doing all right in pass protection. He's been given fairly difficult assignments. He's doing pretty well as a run blocker, which, you know, given his draft profile, you wouldn't necessarily expect, although last year he's a better run blocker than pass protector. I wouldn't screw around with that. I think that he's doing well. I look, like, this is like kind of like the backup quarterback problem, but it's like the backup guard problem. It's like the Drew Samia problem. Like, it's your backup guard may be promising. In fact, he may even have regular season snaps that look really good, right? Like with Oliudo, right? When he was a tackle against the Bears. But that doesn't mean like that is a long-term, so it is not necessarily better. I don't want to like dismiss the idea entirely, but I feel like Ezra Cleveland is playing well enough. Like last year I said, hey, he's not necessarily playing well, but I actually think he's an above average guard. And so far that's actually kind of bearing out. He seems to be an above average guard. So I wouldn't do anything in that regard.
Also, Isn't a top 5 offensive line supposed to look good?
Yeah, in theory, you would say, yeah. So this is driven by a series of charts tweeted out by two charts tweeted out by Ben Baldwin that combines the offensive line rankings in run blocking and pass protection from three different sources, basically. One is from PFF, so the PFF grade. One from ESPN, so that's the run block win rate or the pass block win rate, based off of whichever one is relevant to that aggregation. And the third one is Sports Info Solutions, which a lot of people don't really know about, but does basically a lot of the stuff that PFF does. Instead of using grades, they end up using essentially points gained as like so they convert it already into points. I think it's very useful. It's very expensive, which is, I think, a reason that a lot of writers don't necessarily use it as much. But I've used it in the past, and it's a very powerful system for searching and tagging to plays and stuff like that. So I think they know what they're doing. The run block grades are a little bit wild, though, I will say, from SIS. There's a team that I think it's Washington. The two other orgs are just like, yeah, this team's awful at run blocking. It's like bottom half, like 20th or 25th or something like that, like really bad. And SIS gave them the top run blocking grade, which is, I think, grade is maybe the wrong word. Maybe it's either points gained or blown block percentage, which goes into the points gained calculation. But yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so he aggregates these three sources that all use completely different data. PFF charts on their own. ESPN uses next-gen stats data and uses a model to determine whether or not there was a pass block win. And SIS charts on their own as well. So these are three completely independent. And in that combined ranking, the Vikings are 5th in run blocking and 4th in pass protection, which would suggest a couple of things. One, that though Ed Ingram is a problem, he may be the only problem, right, on that offensive line. 2, that we are overstating the degree to which it is a problem. 3, that Kirk Cousins bears a lot of responsibility, at least based on these models, for the pressure that he's under and the hits that he takes. I don't know that, despite the fact that these are all independent, I don't know that I 100% agree with that. I do think Cousins holds on to the ball too long. I'm not contesting that, but the degree to which it is his fault that he's taking these hits versus, the capability of that offensive line, I don't want to overstate it in the other direction and say, actually, the offensive line is very good. To me, this is not a top 5 offensive line. If you combined those rankings together, the Vikings would be a top 3 offensive line, right? So I don't know that doesn't follow at all, but it is possible that, like, if you get rid of like the weak link by replacing Ed Ingram with Dalton Reisner, that the offensive line suddenly looks like there's just not many problems, because it is a weak link type evaluation where an offensive line looks bad because one player looks bad. So yeah, but yeah, it doesn't really pass the sniff test, but I guess we'll see kind of going forward how it plays out in terms of things like pressure rate and quarterback hits and so on.
Ziggy Dilf asks, with the likelihood of a rookie quarterback starting for Carolina, what are the chances that Brian Flores dials up a blitz rate above 90% on Sunday?
Above 90%. So the highest that we have recorded is like 85%, 88%. I think it's 88%, which occurred again, like Wink Martindale against the Jimmy Garoppolo 49ers a couple of years ago, 2017, I think. 90, that's, oh boy. I get it. So if you listen to the interview with Billy, he mentioned that Bryce Young is just not good against the blitz, but he couched it in terms of basically like, it's not as if Bryce Young has been good against anything. It's just like whatever. I will say that his numbers against the blitz are better than his numbers without a blitz, so we may see less of it. But I don't think that that's how it's going to play out. I don't think the numbers suggest that you don't blitz. I don't think that that's going to be kind of how the Vikings interpret it, nor do I think is how it should be how they interpret it. I just take advantage of the fact that the guy is small, right? Like if you blitz him, you clog up passing lanes, make it more difficult for him to see. And like that's just going to matter more than it is going to matter for somebody like a Justin Herbert who's like 6'4", right? And so it'll be a little bit easier to bat down his passes and stuff like that. So it's possible, but I don't think so. I think the Vikings playing against Justin Herbert to blitz that much, I've seen a lot of people suggest that it was a bad idea, that it was irresponsible, and watching it, I don't agree with that assessment. And then watching the JT O'Sullivan kind of recap of the game, I definitely don't agree with that assessment because, he makes this good point about how difficult all these throws that Justin Herbert, how difficult these throws are. And almost to a T, every difficult throw that he like impossibly manages to make comes off of a blitz. Like they're difficult because of the blitz. Like he can't step into the throw because there's somebody at his feet, which that one does not get cataloged as a pressure by PFF because he doesn't have to move his spot. But there's a guy at his feet, so he can't step into his throw. And he just happens to fit the throw into this impossible window. Even early on, some of the screens are incredible throws because he's angling his arm around a defender and then, flicking the ball through this small window without, again, being able to step into the throw. That's like really high level, incredible arm velocity stuff, right? That the best you can do on defense ever, aside from getting a sack, is make the throw difficult. And from there, interceptions and completions, etc., that's where those come from. But the best you can do to set up those interceptions and incompletions is to make the throw as difficult as possible. That's what good defense is against the pass, making throws as difficult as possible. I think the Vikings did that. It didn't work out, but the Vikings did that. So, I don't think that they should blitz less as a lesson. I mean, he actually averaged fewer yards per attempt when he was blitzed than he wasn't blitzed. Like on the 7 dropbacks, he wasn't blitzed. It's not a high sample, but like it's not as if that demonstrates that the Vikings shouldn't have blitzed, right? Like he averaged 12 yards per attempt on non-blitzes. He had 2 of his 3 big-time throws on non-blitzes and only 1 of his big-time throws on a blitz. And the Vikings blitzed 85% of the time, so only have 1 of them on a blitz. Like that would, to me, suggest that blitzing actually was a good idea. You just have to fix the thing where they let Keenan Allen throw a 49-yard bomb. That obviously sucks. But like that's not a product of like you're blitzing all the time. It's a tertiary product of you're forcing them to go to the screen. They set up a screen to set up a double pass. And so you just got to be aware of that. But that's not because you sent extra guys after the quarterback. That's just Byron Murphy not knowing what to do in that situation. So yeah, blitz, go ahead.
Let's get off the rails for a moment. Brandon asks, or rather says, the Jefferson Under Armour commercial is unhinged and fun. What was the most outlandish Vikings commercial in player history? Was it something involving Moss? My first thought involved the Diggs "Everything Sticks to His Hands" one.
That was a good one.
But you have one that's much better.
Yeah, so when this question came across like the email, I was like, that's a really good question. I'm very tired. I don't want to look this up. But James brought it up and he's like, this is a good question. I was like, well, I'm not going to spend time to do research on this to figure out kind of all of the commercials Vikings are in, but one came into my brain immediately. It's the John Randall chasing a chicken commercial, which is a Nike commercial, where the first 20 seconds of the commercial are him at like a fabric goods store buying fabric. And the reveal is at the 22nd mark or so that he makes this tiny little Favre jersey. And then they cut to him chasing a chicken wearing the Favre jersey to prepare for game day. It's an iconic commercial. It's amazing. It's also a Nike commercial. And they just happen to do some very excellent commercials. And sometimes you don't remember what the product is. So from a commercial standpoint, I don't know if it hits. But from like I'm entertained by this art product, yeah, 100%. That's like a classic Nike moment.
Let's go to Tim, who asks, for Arif's relationship corner. Oh, now you have a relationship corner. When Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce inevitably break up, how would James, with his expansive history of relationships, go about courting Taylor Swift, who also has a long history of relationships? It seems like it would really boost the show's numbers.
Yeah, it would really boost the... I don't think the show would survive that. I can't handle that level of scrutiny.
No, the Swifties would tear us apart.
Yeah, we wouldn't stand a chance. The amount of digging that the Swifties are doing on Travis Kelce first of all, none of it surprises me. I've seen all of this before. Second, it's just like when it enters your kind of realm of expertise, it like really hits home in a way that you're just like, yeah, they like listen to every episode of this podcast that Matt Healy was a guest on. Again, he was only like on the podcast 1 or 2 times, but they listened to like every episode of this podcast. And just to like characterize this guy. And it's just like, okay, I get that like kind of in a meta sense, but now it's hitting my feed, right? So I'm seeing like these astrological charts for Kelsey.
Normally I just be like, how ridiculous that thing is.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I tweeted that, right? It's incredible. It's so phenomenal. And it requires like a fair amount of work, right? Like not just to like figure out all the things you need to figure out to slot Travis Kelsey in the appropriate astrological sign, which I guess they also need the time of day he was born, which at the moment of that tweet they didn't have. Confident they will get it. They are also confident that they will get it. So that's a little terrifying. But I'm sure there's some interview with Donna Kelsey where she's just like, in the morning or something, right? But they have like I don't know all the astrological terms. His rising sign, his falling sign, his Mars sign, and do both people in a relationship have a Mars and a Venus, or is it his Mars and her Venus? I don't know how that works. I guess his Mars and her Venus are like a hilarious pairing. That's when like somebody tells like in like you're hanging out with your friends and they're both like contract oil rig drillers, and they tell this joke about a specific type of oil rig lubricant and they crack up laughing, and you're just like, yeah, I bet that was hilarious. Just like some subject matter expertise joke, and you're just like, what is going on? So yeah, I guess those two signs are hilarious together. Just I'm going to take it on faith that that's the case. A normal thing to say with astrology. Yeah, just a lot going. There's an inner wheel and an outer wheel, and there's like it's very clear that all of the symbols on this enormous chart are very like precisely placed, because it's not that they put like it's like a it looks like a little bit like a dartboard, like because it's radial sections and stuff like that, and they've got like little pins, not pins, but like little symbols as if they were pins on a dartboard, but they're not like in the center. They're very deliberately placed in those segments. It's okay, so it all means stuff. I don't know, but it's a positive, so that's good. I guess my understanding is that Matt Healy and Taylor, their astrological signs were not compatible. The dartboard didn't look good, so bad omens from the dartboard. But this is good. This is good, I guess. But yeah, I can't. That's a level of, and that's just like one slice of it, right? Like I just extracted a 0.1% slice of the discourse occurring among the Swifties and presented it to you. And I just need to remind you that that you multiply that by 1,000, and that's there's everywhere, right? So they're listening to all the episodes of his podcast. So Taylor Swift survived Matt Healy, who they characterize as like an anti-Semitic homophobe. And like, I'm not going to weigh in, but that's not how I would characterize him, I guess is the way I would say it. But, I don't know how much Taylor Swift would survive, James. That would be that might be career over for T Swift. Not because the association with James is cancel worthy or problematic. No,
I mean it could potentially be, but that's not.
It could be, right. In fact, it almost certainly is, but that's not the reason.
Yeah,
it's just because James's relationships go in crazy directions. It's actually probably the name of the Swift song that would be about James's relationship.
Crazy Directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. I'd feel bad, but no, this is good content. That's
yeah.
I
think anybody dating Taylor Swift has to have like man, this sucks, but it's great content.
Yeah, I think great content would end up being the other song off the record that they start to like wonder if that's also about me.
Crazy Directions and great content.
Yeah, that's what she would write about our breakup. It'd be about something stupid too. about me not being British or looking like I do heroin.
I think she'd call the album Lampshades or something.
You know, as a podcast host, I'm rarely speechless, but I just want to point out I was not prepared to catch that stray. Also a Taylor Swift lyric from our breakup album. I don't even know how I'd try to open with a joke, maybe. I don't have a stadium I can rock, so I can't really, I can't use that line, which apparently is brilliant, so I think I'd try to open with a joke. Or I would make some reference to Star Trek The Next Generation and hope she got the joke, or hope she got the reference. That worked with a celebrity once. That was funny. Let's go to... Kyle Slaby asks... We got, two... I don't know if there's any more Swift things after this. Kyle Slaby asks, for James's Swifty Corner, which Taylor Swift song best describes the start to the 2023 season? This Is Me Trying is the name of the song. That is the song to describe the 2023 Vikings so far this year. Let's go to Matthias, who asks, for a Reef's Conspiracy Corner, is there a chance that all this Swift story is just marketing? The NFL is investing a lot to expand its target audience, international games, Nickelodeon, the Toy Story game this Sunday. Is it crazy to think that the NFL paid Taylor just to draw attention? Side point to just include on this: no one on earth wants to watch that Jets game that is going to be broadcasted on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, it's Sunday night.
Yeah, she's going to be in attendance. Now the expected rating is going to be much higher.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I don't it feels to me that if the NFL attempts to continue capitalizing on the relationship to prop up Chiefs games that would otherwise not draw a ton of attention, that Taylor Swift fans are going to see through it. Screw you. We'll have a couple of people watch it and then write these lengthy reports about all the things they say and make their own fan cams and stuff like that. Because a lot of the Swiftie content is tertiary and secondary fan produced content, right? It's someone, stalks some paparazzi who are stalking Taylor and sees all the stuff that they upload to an image archive, and then downloads that, chooses the most intriguing images for some piece of content that they want to make. Taylor is eating chicken with ketchup and what looks like ranch. What was the phrase? Seemingly ranch?
Seemingly ranch.
Seemingly ranch, yeah. Which is just incredible. Someone quote tweeted that and said that was good journalism, right? Because you don't know that it's ranch. And so you just, put it out there that seems to be ranch. But yeah, fair enough. And it's I don't know why that's good content, but certainly it attracted enough attention that eventually people were like, oh my God, this is hilarious that this is a tweet. It's wholesome, right? So it's whatever. But there's a whole secondary market for this stuff, right? Where, a smaller group of people will consume the primary content, which is basically work. It's not necessarily enjoyable, although if you have a fixation, it can be, which certainly I would not put out of the realm of possibility. But they'll create content off of that primary content, and then people will consume that. That's how a fan base this large can sustain itself. Not everybody's consuming necessarily the primary content aside from the music, right? Or the videos of concerts, or obviously the concerts themselves. But the person who put together the Travis Kelce fan cam, where he looks up and they just kind of argue that they just lie. They just say, yeah, he's looking up at Taylor with that look in his eyes and the smile and the laugh. And it's no, he's not. He's looking at some dude in the stands housing a hot dog in one bite. That's what those eyes say. He's in love with the hot dog eating.
It's why he started playing football to begin with, quite frankly.
he's a tight end. This is not that complicated.
Yeah.
Like, but they just like, look, this is like the way that he looks at her. We want, the best for Taylor. And it's like, you made that up. You don't know what even direction he's looking in. And that like stuff goes viral, right? And then people will make fan cams, and then those fan cams go viral. So like eventually, like it's not gonna like work that well. It's just gonna be obvious and cynical. But I don't think that the NFL produced this on their own. I think they're just taking advantage of it. It like, it's kind of, if anyone's read, okay, this is where we get like weird. This is Arif's political content. But if you've read Naomi Klein's book, Shock Doctrine, about how...
Oh, good Lord, really?
Look, I'm just saying, you just take advantage of situations, right? Like, she makes the argument that in the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, they implemented something called shock therapy, or a doctrine of shock therapy, to immediately liberalize the market. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the results were because that would be me being biased, I guess. But that was a strategy that they then used in a bunch of other situations. So, for example, after Katrina, they replaced a lot of public schools with charter schools so that they could have an effective charter school experiment. Again, not going to talk about the results of that. Who's to say if that's good or bad? But I think the NFL is implementing their own Swift doctrine, where in something that they didn't have a hand in, like, I'm not like, people didn't like intentionally cause specifically Katrina, right? Unless you're in Dusty's basement. Maybe that's kind of, you're there. But otherwise, that's not the assumption. But they took advantage of this awful situation to construct what they thought would help them for their political purposes. And here the NFL sees a Swiftening and use, so they don't, I don't think the NFL marketing team could afford Taylor Swift, honestly. So like, I think they just use the fact that there's this like storyline happening right now and try to maximize it. And I think it's mutually beneficial, right? Because let's not pretend that, like, obviously the Taylor Swift name recognition market is essentially saturated, but let's not pretend the interest market is saturated, right? There's a bunch of people who might begin listening to Taylor Swift songs that they hadn't listened to before, right? She's got a bunch of new stuff out, right? That's the whole point of the Eras tour, right? She controls her own music now, right? She owns her masters, right? Which is like, by the way, I mean, James knows this better than I do, but that's huge. That's like enormous, right? So for her to be able to capitalize on that, fantastic. And so for her to be able to enter a new market and generate interest in a new market, maybe the percentage bump is small. Maybe the number of people who are watching the NFL for like the NFL that are now hearing about, Taylor Swift, maybe only like 3% of people are interested enough to like stream on Spotify or whatever. That's still a bump, right? So I think it's mutually beneficial. I don't think the NFL is paying Taylor Swift. Mind you, the NFL never pays its Super Bowl performers because it's mutually beneficial is the idea. So, yeah, I mean, which is like, they didn't pay The Weeknd, but that doesn't mean like The Weeknd's dancers weren't paid. They were just paid by The Weeknd. So The Weeknd took a loss to have the Super Bowl halftime show. That happens a lot. So I think it's kind of that. I don't think it's like this conspiracy where they paid Taylor Swift.
No, I don't think she personally is getting paid by the NFL. I am going to do the whole conspiracy theory thing about the fact that she's got a movie coming out here shortly, a concert film coming out here in the next like couple of weeks, along with the re-release of the 1989 album. There may be a little bit of smoke and fire here. Well,
that might be initiated by Taylor, not by the NFL.
Right.
Like if there's a conspiracy, it would be Taylor Swift is like, here's my next marketing move. I'm going to pretend to date. I could believe that.
That'd be where like all of this is going. So
yeah, I trust Taylor Swift's competency way more than I trust the NFL's.
Oh, absolutely. The NFL can get knocked down by a videotape. Like all credibility can be shot with one TMZ videotape.
Yeah,
as has been repeatedly shown. That's all.
It's been demonstrated over and over.
yeah, the long time listeners of the show and watchers of the NFL know how all this goes. So yeah, I could be convinced that way, but yeah, we'll see. But as a gigantic cynic, I just, quite frankly, I don't see what she sees in him. But that's, you know, that's me.
Like a good guy.
That's me. You know,
we're basically doing the Taylor Swift debate at the end of this episode. Yeah, no, I think he's a good guy.
Good.
Look at the way he looks at her.
This is exactly what I knew was going to happen the moment I put this question in here. Is that it was going to devolve into this? I was going to be the. Although I didn't expect
Travis Kelce.
I didn't think I was going to be the cynic here, and you were going to be the Swiftie. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, okay, honestly, like, pre-show odds, it would have gone the other direction. That's true. But I'm not going to pretend they're not a cute couple. I mean, look at them.
Well, he was rocking a Canadian tuxedo pretty hard there, so.
Right? It was incredible.
Just pointing it out there. All right, Arif, that is going to be the end of this episode. What do you have to plug? Can you
Taylor Swift, apparently.
Can you think of anything after this conversation? Is this a slightly less insane version of the Carly Rae Jepsen thing I keep trying to get you to read?
I technically, because I've never read it, I don't know how insane it is, but my perception of it is that they're not in the same realm of insanity. That one seems way more insane. But also, like, the way that conspiracy has been characterized to me is that, like, yeah, if you read the lyrics to her songs, they mean things, and I'm just like, yeah, obviously, but I'm not going to read about that. So, no, this I think in ranking of insanity, it's 1, the Carly Rae Jepsen thing I haven't read, 2, Melissa, 3, we cover a lot of pop music, 3, Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that sounds
fair. A lot of pop music. Yeah. Anyway, plug. I haven't written anything because a lot of legal stuff happening this week, plus my birthday. So I have the Chargers recap, which people are saying one of the better pieces in terms of writing quality, which is nice and makes up for the fact that I haven't written anything this week. But I am working on like this larger piece about this like blitz question and whether or not the Vikings are being have flipped too long in the other direction. So I don't want to publish that on a Friday. Friday stuff doesn't get numbers. So hopefully it'll be ready for next week, and we'll have 4 games of data to work off of.
Lots of people are saying this. Every time
with that my writing is
that
good,
your writing is getting better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm reminded of the Justice tweets every once in a while. A lot of people are saying this.
Many people are saying.
Many people are saying. All right, that's me at the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back next week to discuss hopefully the victory over the Carolina Panthers. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember that maybe you should just put that in a garage next time. And we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.